Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, Stu, Victoria, Craig, Crystal, Peter, Joe, and last but not least, Lama, you biscuit. And welcome to WorldShares Major Donor Strategy presentation. I'm really sorry that I couldn't be there on the 30th to present to you at the meeting, so we figured that this would probably be the next best thing to communicate the work that we've been doing behind the scenes on the strategy and hopefully answer a lot of questions that you might have into how we've gone about it and why we've done what we've done. So just to let you know, I'm going to move pretty quickly through it. I don't want to bore you in the details, but you will actually get a copy of this so you can look through the figures, and if you have any questions, Sandy is very much up to speed with everything behind it, so I'm sure she'll be able to answer any questions you guys may have on the 30th at the board meeting. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, the first thing I wanted to hit before getting into the presentation itself is the idea behind the belief behind giving, why we give. Because as an organization, if our belief behind why we give isn't right, it's going to affect the impact that we have and how we actually communicate. If we feel guilty and like we're going like cap in hand, people feel that they experience that's not what we want. So I've listed out a couple ideas or thoughts behind our belief in giving and why we believe that it is biblical and why it's good. You probably can't see them, so I'm going to summarize it in a very sort of brief statement. And the idea is this, is that God has blessed us with everything, and He's called us to be stewards of that blessing. He's created it all, and He's entrusted us to look after it. And so the idea is that we are to use it and steward that resource for the good of all people on earth that He's created in His image and likeness. And so God encourages us to be stewards, and He then appropriates and apportions what He gives us on the basis of how we steward it. And so our role and our responsibility at WorldShare as an organization is to help Christian believers become better stewards so that God can ultimately trust them with more to then advance His kingdom on the earth. So that's our belief as to why we do what we do, so to speak. Now I'm going to get into really the crux of our major donor strategy. I really believe that for us to be effective and really be a leader in this space, it's all going to hang on this idea. A lot of you know Simon Sinek, who I've borrowed this intellectual property from. I think you've seen his TED Talk, Know Your Why. So a lot of this won't be new for you, but I just wanted to very quickly run you through it because it's on the backdrop of this that we've sort of built and created the strategy going forward. So as you can see, he talks about the golden circle, and there's three important aspects to the golden circle: what, how, and why. So if I very quickly explain the terms to you, we all know what the what is. That's either the product you sell or the service you offer. Everybody in the world, or every organization in the world, knows what it sells. Then we have the how. Now, few organizations know this. That might be your unique selling point or value proposition. It's really what differentiates you from the competition. Now, then we get to the why, and he explains the why, and that's not to make a profit. That's a result. The why is the reason for your existence. Why do you exist? What's your cause? What's your purpose? Why should anyone care? Okay? So now what he explains is he says most organizations communicate from the outside in, right? And that makes sense. They go from the thing that, that's the clearest, that makes the most sense, and they work their way towards the thing that's the most fuzzy. But in his examination, what he's discovered is that the best organizations in the world doesn't necessarily have to do with the product or service that they're offering, it has to do with the way in which they communicate. And all those organizations communicate from the inside out. Okay, so they go from the why to the how to the what. Now, what's fascinating, I love biology, and I'm going to try and explain this very quickly, even though he does it much better. It'll just help make sense as to why I believe this is so important. But if we look at the human anatomy, if we look at the brain and how we function, what I love is that this golden circle correlates perfectly to the way we've been designed to think and make decisions. So if we look at the outside circle, the what, that relates to what's known as our neocortex. which basically is the part of our brain where we hold all our rational thinking, right? And our logical thinking. It's also where we control all our language. Now, the middle two parts refer to what's known as our limbic brain. Now, this is what controls all our emotions, like trust and faith, if you will. It's also where we make all our decision making, it drives all our behavior, and it has no capacity for language, which is fascinating, which is why it's so important. And that's why communicating to that part of the brain is so crucial when we're actually going out to donors and supporters. Because if we can communicate from the inside out, what we do is we're directly speaking to the part of the brain that drives all the decision making, that drives all the behavior change, and then as we do that, we allow people to rationalize their decisions by the tangible things we do and say. So very, very crucial, because as he says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. We could say, people don't give to what we do, they give to why we do it. So without further ado, how we're going to go about communicating who WorldShares is as follows. Who is WorldShare? What is WorldShare? Simply put, we believe that we've been called by God to partner with the risen Christ to advance his mission here on earth. Now, how we do that is by supporting international locally run organizations that focus on caring for the marginalized, the outcast, and the forgotten. We also look at connecting Australians with these organizations, with these Christian organizations who are working within their communities to bring about transformation. And then what we do is provide funding and support for internationally locally run organizations that focus on caring for the marginalized, the outcast, and the forgotten. Also importantly, what we do is we develop programs focusing on developing skills in leadership, management, and accountability alongside our ministry partners that build their capacity in order to increase the impact they're having within their communities. Why, how, what? I believe if as an organization we can learn to communicate in this way, we will connect people to who we are, the essence of who we are, and then how we do things. It will allow them to get on board and champion the cause because they understand and they identify it. So now this is very nice and it's all nicely catered, but what we wanted to do was we wanted to give the board and the organization sort of an elevator pitch, because we often get asked this question, who is WorldShare? What is WorldShare? And it's like, well, where do we start? So that's how we want to communicate, but what we've done is we've gone and simplified it into an elevator speech, which I think will help us communicating who we are as an organization going forward. And this is it. WorldShare exists to advance Jesus Christ's mission to care for the outcast, forgotten, and marginalized. We do this by funding our international ministry partners projects and developing capacity building and training programs alongside them to increase the impact within the community. Simple, short, sharp, succinct. As you can see, I'm still learning it. I do believe we'll get to a stage where we can all know it off by heart and we can rattle it off nice and quickly. Okay, so that was really the crux around the communication of our major donor strategy going forward. Now I'm going to get into the sort of the detail around how we've gone and set it up and how we're going to manage this process going forward. So step one, as you will see, the first step in our process is to classify our donors, because we've got things like the 80-20 rule, and the idea is that if we don't develop a strategy that actually focuses on the biggest supporters, that could become dangerous for us down the track if we're not actually acknowledging them and giving them the level of service that they expect based on the amount that they're giving. That's logical from a business perspective. It's also logical from a non-for-profit perspective. So this is how we've categorized our donors. We've basically come up with 5 different classifications. We've got bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond. You can see the different amounts in terms of the classifications and where each one slips into. And then over here, you've got the revenue percentage in terms of the number of donors that we have and the revenue percentage that they make up as a result of that. So very interesting figures. Now I'm going to move ahead and just unpack a little bit what's going on here. You can have a look at this on the strategy to make a little bit more sense. But let's see what the numbers are saying to us. So, yes, this is what the numbers are saying to us. So, as we look at it, we've got 1,308 active donors. They gave 1.4 million in the last financial year. And these are the different amounts. So yeah, they categorize. So 1,045 bronze, 224 silvers, 25 golds, 12 platinums, and 2 diamonds. Now, what's interesting when we actually go and analyze the data, what we find is that our top 3% of donors contribute 44% of our funds. This is really an interesting statistic, but at the same time it's a little bit scary. So 39 donors contribute 44% of WorldShares donations that have been raised. So if we lose those 39 donors, we're in a bit of trouble. Hence why the need for a major donor strategy and a major donor person is pretty important. So we're onto it, which is a good sign. What's interesting though is if you take out that 3%, so we just take out that top 3%, we're left with the other 97%, you should have the 80-20 split rule coming into effect. You know, 80% of donors contribute only 20% and vice versa, 20% of donors contribute 80% of the funds. What we find is something very interesting. 20%, it's 18, but we'll call it 20, only contribute 50% of the funds. And the other 80% contribute the other 50%. So, as you can see, and as we'll pull through the data, it's not as simple as focusing on the top 20% of donors. Because, you know, the idea is focus on that 20%, they'll bring in the 80%. Well, our top 20% only brings in 50%. So what this means is we've got a substantial donor base with the vast majority of them giving a similar amount, making it very challenging to develop just a major donor strategy. So we'll need to find better ways of engaging the majority of our donors, really in order for WorldShare to reach its full potential. Because that's what's exciting about it. There is so much untapped potential when I look at those stats. Just by simple engagement, and I think I'll go into this a little bit later, but just through some simple engagement techniques, I believe that it'll be relatively straightforward to help grow our donors and move them up that spectrum. So going from a bronze to a silver, to a gold, to a platinum, to a diamond, I really believe, like, I can't stress this enough, the amount of potential that's just waiting there for us as an organization to get in and start building those relationships and those connections. So very, very exciting to see. Now we'll move to step 2. So this is what I've labeled the donor status, because it's great to know that you've got X number of donors. The question is, are they engaged? Are they on board? Are they actively giving? Or when was the last time they gave? So how we've looked at the data and categorized it and analyzed it, we've said, right, we've got active donors. They gave within the last financial year. Okay, so they're engaged, they're on board, and they're activated. We've then got our inactive donors. They gave so that they didn't give last financial year, but they did give the financial year before that. So they are on board, they are connected, they just haven't given this financial year. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, and that's a lot of work that we need to do, is actually go about engaging them and finding out why. Maybe it's that they give once every 3 years. Maybe they're just a little bit upset that they haven't been shown any love and we just need to show them some love. So that's what we need to find out. And then lapsed, they have not donated in over 2 years. Once again, if this is this right? Is this the best way? With I guess the time and the resources we have available, this is we see as the best way of categorizing our current donor base. Yes, it can change. Yes, we can look at it, but we think this is the best way for now. And last but not least, the prospect donor, they're engaged, they're interested in donating, and they're on the radar. We just need to keep engaging them. So now, what's interesting about looking at this is our potential low-hanging fruit. We've identified a lot of opportunity with our current active donors, but when we look at our inactive donors, there are some exciting trends and opportunities presenting themselves here. Because as I mentioned, they gave previous financial year, so they're still pretty warm as far as being a supporter of WorldShare is concerned. And as we look at it, 388 donors gave in the previous financial year, a total of just under $375,000 worth of funds. So what does this mean? Well, for a start, we have 388 donors who gave in FY 2017, but not 2018. They're valued at $375K. based on the fact that they've given, it means they connected to the vision and they believe in what we're doing. Okay, very important. And using the psychology of it's easier to sell to an existing customer than a previous customer, I do believe that we can, through some human engagement, we can bring a lot of these donors back on board, which is exciting. Initially we thought that they might have gone off board because of the programs that we exited, but we hadn't really exited the programs in 2017. So I think there's some huge untapped potential here. And so our goal for next financial year is 15%. I think that's very conservative, $56,000. I do believe we can do a lot more, so very exciting opportunity there. Okay, then we come to step 3, donor type. As we know, not everyone thinks the same, not everyone acts the same. We all have different reasons and motivations for why we give and what motivates us. So it's very important for us to categorize our donor base, to understand who we're speaking to so that we can develop specific language to communicate what drives them. Because if we can communicate to them in a way that drives them, then you will definitely start to see a lot more support and a lot more donors getting on board with who we are and where we're going as an organization. So we've got this information from a recent event we went to through CMA, and they've categorized 7 types of donors. I'm not going to go into all of them. I'm just going to focus on the top 2. So the communitarian and the devout. They make up just under 50% of our givers. Okay, so these are really, I think, the focus points for us. This is where the majority of our donors are going to sit. And so the communitarian is just, it's doing good makes sense. We've been blessed, and it's good to be a blessing to others. What's interesting is already on my engagement with the major donors, I've seen a lot of givers fall into these 2 categories as I've categorized them. I've asked them what drives you, what motivates you. All of them so far have fallen into these categories. So I think we're onto something. And the devout, it's God's will. God calls us to take care of the poor, the vulnerable, the lost, the forgotten, and so we need to do God's will and act upon it. So those are the 2. Now, why is this important, Davyn? What's the purpose? Well, firstly, to tailor our marketing strategies to make sure that we're communicating in such a way that communicates with the majority of givers. So we've got a lot of different, bulk marketing strategies, and what we need to do is to ensure that the material that we send to them is actually communicating in a way that they identify with. So with the communitarians, we're not just saying, here's our programs, we're talking impact. Here's the difference you're making, here's the change, the transformation you're bringing. You fed 388 children, you educated 50 children, you. So driving that impact and communicating that. And then with the devouts, communicating how it's God's will, talking about Bible verses that relate to how God takes care of the poor and the vulnerable, and how it's our responsibility to do that as well. So yes, bulk communications need to be centered around that, the impact we're having in our communities, transformation we're driving. Yep, so I think I spoke to that. So that's for the bulk communications. For our major donors, so just for FYI, our major donors are being classified as our diamonds, our platinums, and our golds. We will need to determine each and every single one of these donors in terms of which category they fall into. Because once again, if we want to connect them and get them committed and on board with where we're going, we need to make sure we're communicating in a way that they identify with and they understand. So I've already begun doing this in my conversations and chats with them, and we're already getting a good idea about which one they fall under and what drives them. So now we come to step 4, the donor engagement experience. So very important part of the strategy, because at the end of the day, the question is, going forward from here onwards, what sort of interaction are we going to have with our donors? And time is one of those valuable resources that's limited. And so we need to steward our time in line with the level. Joe, what did you call it again? I can't remember. Something about stewardship. You said faithful stewardship of time. You'll have to remind me about that one. So in terms of faithfully stewarding our time, we've gone and categorized each of our donor types, and then we've listed a number of different experiences that we can use to engage them with. So you've got your quarterly newsletters, your partner updates, your detailed partner review, and then the 2 very important ones for the major donors are your phone calls and your personal visits. And you'll see in each of them, we've basically categorized, that's better, what we give each level and how frequently. Okay, so just as an example, you can have a greater look through this. So let's take, for instance, our platinum. Yes, they get a quarterly newsletter, they get a partner update, they get a detailed partner review, and they get it annually. Okay, because generally your platinums, they're giving substantial amounts and they're giving to a specific program. So they want a detailed partner review, and they'll at the very least want it annually. A phone call, so to engage with them, catch up with them, that we're doing quarterly, so once every 3 months. And then a personal visit biannually, so at least twice a year we're visiting them. Okay? Versus the likes of a bronze, where they get quarterly updates, partner updates, not a detailed partner review, because generally they're given a small amount and it might be to sponsor a child or something of that extent. So they're not as expectant or engaged with the program specifically yet. Phone call, no. Personal visit, no. The silvers, we definitely want to give a phone call at least once a year. As I mentioned, I think there's 201 or 220 donors that are sitting in the silver category, and they all have the potential to be upgraded to gold. And I think by just simply engaging them with a phone call once a year, that's a great start to moving them up that spectrum. So that's the donor engagement experience. Very quickly, I've just explained what goes under each experience. This is not a thorough list by no means. It's just highlighting why. What's the purpose behind these engagements? If we're just engaging for engagement's sake, we're wasting our time, and we're wasting their time, and we're wasting our money. So we want to engage them in practical ways that drive value. Everything's about how can we drive value, how can we add value, how can we connect you to the work that we're doing, and what's the material that we can create to ultimately connect you in to the work that God's calling us to do together as His body, as His church. And so those, you can read those in detail. The one I will explain is the phone calls and the personal visits. I'll get to those in a second, just explain to you the purpose and the function behind those, because that's, I think, really going to be the main part of well, at least my role. Sorry, I haven't even explained. I'm Davyn. For those of you who haven't met me, I think I've met most of you. Sorry, I was supposed to introduce myself right in the beginning, and I completely forgot about that. Hi, I'm Davyn. I am the supporter relationship manager at WorldShare. I signed my contract yesterday. Thank you. Now that I've done that, I can continue. So yes, so those will be the main ones that I will be looking at. Okay, step 5, required resources. How are we going to bring this together? How are we going to make this happen? We will need some support from our amazing trustee board. And so 2 things we're looking at. Setting up our amazing CRM that has so much potential, but it's currently being used as a glorified information storage system. We really want to set this thing up to work for us in such a way that will really allow us to achieve economies of scale as we continue to grow. Because we're transitioning out of a pruning stage, we're going into a growth stage, and we will need a functional CRM to ultimately help us grow and keep up with the growth and the capacity building as we go. So we're looking at options for enhancements to Salesforce. This is Sandy's area of specialty, and ball to Sandy. She'll take you through that a little bit more. And then something that I want to raise or highlight is just that obviously with looking at the major donors and looking at the figures and the opportunity, we can definitely see that there is some massively untapped potential. Now, from what I've understood in previous, in the team further back, there was a lot more sort of relationship management people or major donor engagement people. Currently, there's me. And you must be pretty desperate for me because I'm not that good. But as I'm saying, there is a lot of potential here, and I think we will need, at the very least, one more person in a similar sort of position to myself, if not the same position as myself, or above me, above, below, whatever, doing similar to what I'm looking to do, which is engage with our supporters. Really, major donors, or just donors in general, is a pillar of our business, of our organization, and so we need to engage this pillar, and we need to drive hard at it if we're really going to see WorldShare expand and become all that I believe God's called it to be. So if we could get another person in this space, partnering or supporting me in this role, I think we would see a lot more traction and a lot faster. So those are the required resources. Okay, that sounds great, Davyn. Love the vision and the idea. What have you been doing for the last couple of months? Well, apart from the MPV, which was a lot of fun with Dr. Joe, which we started doing this through the MPV. This is what we've done to date. So what we've identified, as you saw, we've been engaging with the major donors. So we've identified who they are. There's 39 of them, the diamonds, the platinums, and the golds. And the idea is that we would have engaged with all of them by the 19th of September. The reason 19th of September, I go away to South Africa on Tuesday, and I'm only back on the 11th. So, but to date, we've engaged with 26 out of the 39. The conversations have been incredible. They've been so grateful. They're excited. We're really getting them reconnected to where we're going. They've been so grateful for the transparency, just being honest with them about what we've gone through and where we've come from. But they're also getting excited about where we're heading to now. We've got our office blessing coming up, and they're all just frothing at the thought of being able to come and be part of this. So people are just wanting to be activated. They're just wanting to be given a reason. And so that's what we do. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting a bit carried away. Okay, as I mentioned, the phone call script and the purpose, once again, it's just simply an introduction. Who am I? What is my role? That's naturally what you do with a phone call. Thank them for their support, and then learn more about, this is what's been super interesting, is learning about them and understanding what connected them in the first place, because that's helping us understand what drives them. And a lot of them have said similar sorts of things. It was David Cohen who came and did a talk or did a sermon, and they connected to David's vision and where he was going, or they heard Joe speak somewhere at an event or whatever, and they were connected to her story. So it's very interesting to understand what drives those people to then come on board and get connected with us. So learning what drives and motivates them, and then what can we be praying for each of them? That's courtesy of David Cohen. He just used to call them up and be like, what can I pray for? So that's a pretty cool one. So that's the phone calls. We then look at the visitations. So this is very important. We've already commenced quite a few of them. So we want to have them completed by the 29th of September. So far today we've done 11 out of the 19 in New South Wales. We've got 5 in Victoria. We visited some of those through the MPV without even realizing it. Queensland, we will get Blaze to visit those 3 donors over there and connect in with them. We've already connected in with 2 of them, which is good. So 1 more to go. Tasmania, which we can just tag on to Melbourne. Victoria, WA, I don't know if we want to go to WA to meet, that's open to discussion. And then there's 3 international donors, WorldShare UK, Partners International. I'm engaging with them via the phone, so I don't think we'll be doing visits. But the purpose of the visit is, once again, really build a connection with our donor and connect them to our why. Because, as explained, if we really can connect them to that why, we can take them to the next level, which is building a donor champion mentality. To the point where they're almost like, they see themselves as like a shareholder in the business. Like it's their responsibility to be on board and be funding it to allow us to keep going and doing the work that God's called us to do. So it's an understanding what adds value to them, how can we be adding value, how can we service them, what sort of engagement they want, because we might be saying, yeah, I'll call you like once every 2 months, and you'll just be like, no, like once a year is fine, awesome, and that's how we'll engage you. How they want us to communicate with them, and determine if they're willing to pledge ongoing support. So that really lends itself to that donor champion mentality, that if they can see themselves as really a partner with us, then we can allow them, or hopefully encourage them, to pledge support, which will just make life so much easier for us when it comes to planning going forward. So that's where we're up to date. Let's go change the world. Woo! That's lame. And if you have any questions, Sandy will be more than happy to oblige. and answer them for you. But I hope that was insightful. I hope that added value for yourselves and gave you some insights into WorldShare and what we've done and where we're headed. I'm being genuine when I say that I'm so excited about what God's doing in this organization and where He's taking it. He really has been preparing it for something massive, and I believe we're starting to step into that right now as we speak and take that ground for the kingdom in ways that we haven't seen before. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. Looking forward to catching up with you guys in person, for those who I haven't met in person. But thank you so much for listening. God bless you. And I'll finish off with a blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord turn His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His countenance to you and give you His shalom. God bless.